Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Pierce. And will it be? Won't it be? What time is it? Well, don't know because that's what it's like living in a war zone, I guess. So I am super excited to be joined yet again by, I say yet again for the second time, by Caolan Robertson, whom I'm sure you guys know for the reporting work he's done, the documentary work he's done concerning the war in Ukraine, and prior to that as well on other topics. Caolan, thank you so much for joining again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again. The last chat was really great, so lots to talk about now, though.
Absolutely. Well, goodness me, isn't there always? So give us a sense of where you're at. There's a very nice view out behind you, with it obviously OPSEC, but there you go.
Yeah, well, this is Maidan, where the revolution happened, I mean, this is the first time I've really filmed here. It's actually quite a lovely view, but I wanted to make a couple of films today talking about everything that's been happening with Trump, everything that's been happening with the air defense systems that are no longer going to be delivered here. So I thought I would do it here because there's actually an active air alert happening right now. They're shooting drones at the sky at the moment. So it really hammers on the point of just how much Ukraine needed this stuff.
I had indeed heard that Ukraine was experiencing an early daytime sort of air raid, or there are alerts going on in Kiev. So yeah, that's a bit of a shocker there. It looks like you're in Ukrainska Hotel Ukrainska, which is overlooking the Maidan.
Yes, I've never been here before. That's Hotel Ukraine there, which is super cool.
Oh,
this one, I live like in the center of Kyiv, so I don't normally stay in hotels. I just booked this for the view now to do a video. But yeah, there's the Globus underneath, and then there are, of course, the memorial flags behind me. This hotel is pretty old school. It's kind of a little bit oligarchy and a little bit ostentatious, but I think it's just quite famous. But yeah, no, Maidan is looking beautiful tonight, as always. It's not as busy because there is an active air alert now, and I could hear some shooting, some sort of fire. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird for it to happen at this time. Normally it's at night, so I'm not too sure what's going on.
Yeah, talk about that Hotel Ukrainska behind you. I stayed there the first time I went to Ukraine. Second time I went to Ukraine, where I met you out there. I made the guys stay in that because it's like an old school Soviet hotel. You get in there, the staff are very Soviet-esque. It's got that real feel to it, and it's iconic and it overlooks the square. So it's just amazing.
Yeah, that's true.
So what does Kiev feel like at the moment? Because we've heard that there's been a real uptick in strikes on Kiev. The Shahid drones have been at times almost getting up to 500 drones and missiles thrown in as well. And that comes at a time where Ukraine are, as ever, desperate for air defenses and air defense interceptors. What's it feel like to live there at the moment? Does it feel different?
It does feel different. I talk to Ukrainians all the time. I went for a run this morning at 5:30 a.m. and spoke to some people that were gathered watching the sunrise. And it does, because the Patriots are being depleted. The types of drones that are entering the city it's not just more frequent, but they are resilient to electronic warfare. There was a drone downed, and this stuff spreads like wildfire in Telegram groups here. Everyone knows what's going on. The drones here, some of them are jet powered that are coming in. They can go twice as fast, and they have these new techniques where they dive straight down. It's like terrorizing people. When they put 500 drones into the city, I remember arriving in the city that day because I just come back from Odessa, and I was arriving in a city full of smoke. Like, I remember driving into Kyiv, it looked like a layer of smog. The whole city was full of smoke because there were buildings burning everywhere. And there's also been drones that have crashed recently in Kyiv, and they've looked at the cameras in them, the optics, and they now have two cameras. One is for terrain and one is just for visuals. And they have an SD card with 100 gigs in it that shows the terrain between Kursk and here and the city. And it means they can't be jammed with GPS stuff. They have built-in terrain navigation. They can crash straight into their target. So they don't just go faster. They're not just more specific. But they're also putting things like white phosphorus. They're putting, thermite in some of these drones now to inflict more damage, and shrapnel. You see this in the marks of some of the buildings when these things go. So they're more brutal, faster, more dangerous, and they're going to happen more frequently. And Russia has said that they want to double it to 1,000 attacks a day by August. it's possible. If there aren't sanctions put on Russia, if those factories aren't destroyed, North Korea are going to put 20,000 factory workers into Russia to help build these things, then they are going to do that. And 500 drones hitting this city devastated Kyiv. Honestly, I mean, I've come here for 2.5 years. It was the worst I've seen the city, the worst state and condition, the strain on emergency services. If that was doubled in every night, I don't know what that would look like. So people are pretty worried about that. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, you are seeing Ukraine striking at these drone manufacturing facilities, Yelabuga in Tatarstan. There's also one Izhevsk that was targeted the other day, and that was pretty decent. But I do wonder why it's taken them so long to be able to strike at these effectively. And obviously, they haven't effectively struck at them enough yet. I mean, they've done damage a number of times. There's also the interceptor drone that Zelensky was talking about this today. Interceptor drones being possibly the answer. Have you heard anything about interceptor drones?
There's massive technological advances. There's AI systems I've seen that are amazing to shoot these things down, and they're being developed at breakneck speed. United 24 are doing a campaign to raise $4.5 million right now to get more of these AI systems made. They can shoot down basically everything, and it's all automated. But they're really, really expensive. They're made in country, and it just costs a lot of money. And this, the flow of cash from the US is obviously slowed down, if not stopped. But the reason that Ukraine hasn't been firing stuff into Russia as frequently recently is because Trump basically said he wants to restart these fake negotiations. Putin said he wants to have more peace talks. So Ukraine has been kind of shackled, and they've said, okay, we'll hold off hitting your best friend Putin if you actually, carry on supporting us. And it looks like Trump was pretty annoyed at Ukraine for doing things like Operation Spiderweb. Now that the Pentagon has said that they're not going to give the air defense systems as promised in the weapons packages, Ukraine is now unshackled yet again, and I think you're going to be seeing a lot more long-range strikes, because what the hell is Trump going to do now? He calls up Zelensky and berates him and bullies him. He calls up Putin and disciplines him like it's his favorite child still. It's kind of like tells him off like it's his favorite kid. So this is no good. But I mean, Ukraine being unleashed, they took out half the Black Sea Fleet, a country without a navy. They've got a lot of stuff up their sleeve. They've got a lot of plans. Operation Spiderweb was just the beginning. But now they know for sure Trump is not going to give us a single thing. We don't have to please him anymore. We can just do whatever we want. So that's what's probably going to happen in the next few weeks. A lot more strikes.
I've been somewhat upbeat about what Ukraine have been up to recently. So aside from what Russia is doing to Ukraine in terms of the Shaheeds and the missiles and what's going on some areas of the front, Ukraine is they took out the acting commander of the Black Sea Fleet, yes. I believe, the deputy of the Navy up in Koroneva and Kursk. They have been slamming radar and air defense systems in Crimea with these drones that are either taking off from unmanned surface vehicles, these kind of Magura V5 boats, or from these Beaver drones that they've made capable of doing first-person view and whatnot. And there's just been loads of stuff that's actually been happening. Train logistics have been hammered. So I get a sense that Ukraine does have capabilities and is using them. And I think aviation is getting close to the front line. And if you say that they can strike deep into Russia, they'll be unshackled. That's exciting. Is that fair for me to be a little bit upbeat in that context?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, Spiderweb as well. I said that was absolutely incredible. And Ukraine have got a lot more plans like that. They've been doing amazing strikes, very targeted, very, very specific strikes. And all I'm saying now is that we're going to be seeing an increased frequency of that, because every time Ukraine does it, it upsets Trump. When 500 drones were put into this city and missiles, Trump basically said, well, what did they expect? It was retaliation. Now that is basically over. That whole phase of trying to please the Pentagon is now finished, because they're not even going to give Ukraine the air defense they need. So I think they're going to increase the frequency they've been doing that to Russia, which is a great thing. I think it's good. It's also nice to finally know what the intentions of the Trump administration are, which is to do nothing. And finally, we can start moving on from these fake peace talks and all this kind of song and dance about, is Putin going to just give up and walk away, and is Trump going to end this in 2 seconds and treat it like a business deal? I think we can now close that chapter and move on. And Ukraine's looking at what it has already, looking at its European partners and saying, right, this is what we have in our arsenal. Let's go for it. So I think it's still a good time. It's yeah.
Do you think though that Europe is ready to cut off the US or ignore the US or whatnot? Because I mean, I do wonder what Zelensky's going to do. So Trump phoned Putin today. I don't know, because you've been busy, I don't know if you've seen any thing about that, but he phoned Putin. Putin appeared to say, we're not backing down on any demands that we have had, and so you're back to square one. Now Trump either goes along with that and Ukraine just ditches the US as nicely as possible. What do you see Europe's relationship with the US at the moment looking like?
Pretty broken, because Trump basically harassed and went to political war with a lot of Europe as soon as he got inaugurated, with his taxes, his import taxes, and just his rhetoric around the EU. So, and especially with his stuff about invading Greenland, just insanity. So he was already kind of on the back foot with Europe. Europe have now, for the first time, and we saw this at the NATO summit, and we've been seeing this at the Coalition of the Willing, and I know a lot of it's still just talk, but realizing that the only way to actually survive as a continent is to bolster their own defenses, and to actually not be reliant on the US anymore for defense systems, for finances, for money. And I think that's actually, people are actually waking up and realizing that. Leaders are waking up and realizing that. That's why Estonia are now building anti-tank trenches. They're really taking the Russian threat seriously. It's why France and Germany are developing great alternatives to the Patriot system, because if the US are going to cut the tap off weapon systems are selling around the world for any arbitrary reason, then Europe's going to have to start making their own stuff. And it looks like they are. They're investing really heavily in it. So it's a good turning point. It's just slow. These things happen so slowly. It should be 10 times quicker. We still spend less than 1% of our GDP helping Ukraine. It's an insignificant amount, especially if you compare it to Russia spending like 47, nearly 50% of its GDP on this war. And it's a war against all of us. So it's slow, but at least it's in the right direction.
Emmanuel Macron just had a rant yesterday, I think it was, saying, why are we still buying stuff off the US? We should be buying stuff from inside Europe, as he often does. Fun fact as well, Canada have just signed a mining deal with Greenland, which is perfectly behind the US's back, and just a lovely diplomatic win there for Canada. What are your views? Because the 18th package of sanctions from the EU is being held up by Hungary and Slovakia. So I'm interested in what Ukrainian views are of the United States, like on the ground. What do people think about Trump and the United States? What do people think about Hungary and Slovakia?
Well, I mean, from the beginning, Ukrainians separate Americans from Trump always, because there are American volunteers here from the beginning, everywhere, philanthropists, people helping out the country massively. They're disappointed to the point where it's like they've just completely given up on what Trump is going to do. They see American politics having been polluted with KGB agents and propaganda in the same way that Russia has been trying to do that here. They tried to back their politicians here. They flooded Ukrainian media with Russian propaganda, and they try to infest and infiltrate every single corner of society. Ukrainians know what that is. They've had their insane neighbors for long enough. They just see it happening successfully in parts of America. So that's how the Ukrainians I know kind of view this. They just see America as infiltrated at almost every level. It's like this kid, Ivan, who reached out to the American aerospace engineer, I don't know if you saw this, saying he wanted drone investment, financial investment, jet investment, KGB agent type person. So it's just every corner of society. And they see what's happening in Hungary as the exact same part of what Russia did to Georgia, as what Russia tried to do in Moldova, and what Russia tried to do here in Belarus. Just toxic Russian influence everywhere. So it's, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like they know what it is. They've seen it.
By the way, you visually frozen, but not that's a problem, as long as we can hear you. So have you thought about going to Hungary? Do you have an interest in like visiting there and getting a sense? Because I know you've been to a number of different places. You went to Syria, for goodness sake, and Hungary and Georgia seem to be suitably interesting places, and also dangerous for you to go and visit. Are these places that interest you professionally?
The next place I'm going, probably in the next few weeks, will be Estonia. I've got some amazing interviews lined up with the government there, and I'm going to film those anti-tank trenches and go right to the border where the river is, and say, you know, this is a country that knows what's next, what knows Russia's intentions better than any other country in Europe because they've had them as their neighbors. I think that'll be really powerful to show what could happen. You know, visiting Hungary for the first time after Russia put me on the international wanted list after I went to Kursk, because apparently betraying borders is terrible, you know, to do that to Russians. They would never. Means I don't know what would happen. I mean, I know they're in the EU, and it's very unlikely they would go after a journalist, but still, they are completely in the pocket of Putin now, and I don't know if they would act on that. There are about 13 countries I definitely cannot go to, but it's gotten so bad in Hungary, so bad, that actually other journalists that I've spoken to have questioned and said, well, you never know what might happen. And that's how much Hungary's fallen and so quickly, which is a shame because they just opened a direct line between Kyiv and Budapest. Which was actually pretty useful. I took that when I went to Syria to fly to Istanbul. So it's a little bit annoying as well, but I'm considering that now as a possibility because of how messed up it is there. But again, Ukrainians don't look at Hungarians as the problem. They look at politics and politicians in the pocket of Putin's puppets who have polluted societies all across Europe, all across the world. And they just see this as part and parcel of Russia's war. Russia's war is putting their people in power, and doing it slowly.
Yeah, I mean, it's great news coming from Hungary that they're due their presidential election or general election next year, and they've got the opposition party under a chap called Peter Magyar now sometimes polling at 15% above Fidesz and Viktor Orban, the ATPGEO party. So there are some green shoots of hope politically around Europe. You know, now Denmark's just taken over the European Council, I think 6-month membership. So that's good because they've got Ukraine's best interest at heart. In fact, that's where Zelensky's been today in Denmark. So there is some hope for politically for Ukraine. What do people on the ground feel at the moment? If I can use you as a barometer for Ukrainian mood, where do you think people are at?
I think there is definitely a positivity. I mean, what happened with the on the 17th with hundreds of drones coming into the city was obviously devastating, but people seem a lot more confident in 2025. For the 2 years I've been visiting here, I think Ukrainians know and realize that Russia's economy is really in a much worse position than it was before.
Yeah.
If you read all the newspapers coming out of Moscow, and again, Ukrainians know what's going on, they've started to admit this. Markets have folded over with plastic.
Sorry, you're breaking up quite a bit there, Caolan. If you go back to yeah, I think you'll be okay. If you go back to the Ukrainians, you know, seeing the newspapers being recognizing the economy's in trouble.
Yes. Okay. So, but people in this country, they know what's going on in Russia. They can feel it as well. And there's a lot more hope now. And I don't know if it's just because it's summer and it's just because the city's even more beautiful and everyone's happy because of the weather. But from all the years I've been visiting here, it seems like there's a confidence universally, because Ukraine is in a different position than it was before. Ukraine knows how to fight even better than any other country in Europe. They've developed all their own stuff, their own missiles. They're hitting Russia where it hurts, and they can actually win and can actually fight back. And you can kind of feel it everywhere in all different corners of society. It's a lot less bleak than when I first came here. And it feels nice. And this is everywhere. This is in Odessa as well, where I've just spent a bunch of time. I mean, Ukraine has always been resilient. And whenever there's an air raid attack, the next few hours, people go and swim in the Black Sea, or they come out here and they still go for lunch and still go for dinner. But even now, I think it's far more hopeful. And that's really, really nice to see, because there's a quiet confidence. This country never really had a lot of confidence before. People didn't really think of Ukraine before the invasion globally. And they're shooting you can hear the shooting the drones there. There's a new confidence here that Ukraine can actually fight back and hold off one of the biggest, most feared armies in the world for years and years, and they've done it consistently. So I don't know. It feels like quite a positive time, despite that racket.
Yeah, yeah. Goodness. The thing for me is the economy. Like the Russian economy really does seem to be creaking at the moment. There are all sorts of different indicators to suggest it's in a lot of trouble. And you mentioned that even the Russian newspapers are seemingly priming the population with this idea that there is a bit of economic struggle going on, and that just doubles my frustration because Trump could easily end this war. If Trump wants a bloody Nobel Peace Prize, he would sanction the absolute crap out of Russia and economically just give them hell. But he seems to be far too aligned with Putin. It's just absolutely enraging. But there you go. So you've just been down in Odessa. What were you doing down there? Because Odessa gets an awful lot of focus from Russian munitions as well.
I was just meeting an air defense unit that go out on the Black Sea and do a lot of they just do air defense. And I was getting a relationship with them before I could get approval to go and film. It takes a long time, but also I just go to Odessa quite frequently because if I ever need a break from Kyiv, I don't want to leave Ukraine. I still want to keep reporting here. Then I go down to Odessa. I love Odessa. It's beautiful, and it just has this incredible vibe of just resilient people enjoying life, swimming in the Black Sea. Just it's absolutely stunning. And I also went to dispel lots of Russian propaganda because whenever I mention the word Odessa, that's when I get the most anger and fury out of Russians on Twitter because they see Odessa as a Russian city more than anywhere else. They see it as the jewel of the Russian Empire because of the lies put out by Catherine the Great. Who was only great at putting out Russian propaganda and lies. And I went to a Cossack cemetery from the 1600s, from the 1700s to show that there were Ukrainians here before Russia ever set foot on that land. And I showed ancient archaeological sites from 5 BC where there were Greek settlements to show that there were people here far before Russia even existed as a nation, to just prove a lot of that. And to talk about it because it's a massive symbol of Russian propaganda. And again, just because a lot of people speak Russian in a part of Ukraine doesn't mean that it has any connection to Russia or the people there want to be Russian. So I spoke to a lot of people that only speak Russian because it's like 70% there, who all said that they wanted nothing to do with Putin, wanted nothing to do with the Kremlin, and just disproved a lot of that. So it was a really interesting trip. But there's so much history in Odessa. My great-great-grandparents are buried in the Oblast of Odessa. So I was looking at that. They were part of the Black Sea Germans, which is kind of like a tribe of Germans that were there. So it's all very interesting. But yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Every time I meet a foreigner that comes to Ukraine, I always tell them to come to Odessa. But yeah, it's more dangerous. You know, if this was my apartment there, a drone went like right past the window and hit like a maternity hospital, and there was a building on fire next to me. So they've really upped their attacks on that city. Yesterday they hit it again. But the smoke clears and people carry on.
So I've had this question for many years now, in that if I'm being as charitable to the Russians as possible, then, and I know they definitely do aim for civilians at least sometime, and maybe a lot, right? So Kherson is a great example of how they are just basically murderous, right? But when they are throwing drones and missiles into Odessa and Kiev, are they genuinely trying to hit military targets that would just so happen to be, or infrastructural, like important military-esque targets that just so happen to be in these major cities? Or are they genuinely actually going for a maternity hospital, for an apartment block? Are they seriously sending these drones, many hundreds of kilometers to hit an apartment block?
It's a mix of both. The tactic in the Russian army right now is to terrorize the civilian population of Ukraine so they give up their support for Zelensky and somehow become subdued. That is a part and parcel part of Russia waging war on any country. But yeah, of course they target military targets as well. I mean, there's warehouses, energy infrastructure they always try to hit. They hit the port a lot. But the drones that are being fired from Crimea into Odessa are very, very accurate. Again, we can see the type of camera systems they use now. They're basically impossible to really shoot down in a lot of parts of Odessa as well. They don't have the same kind of air defenses here, and so what they hit, they usually intend to hit, like very, 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 very accurate. So when they hit a maternity hospital, when they hit an apartment building, when they indiscriminately hit hotels and places where regular civilians live, it is intentional, and it's mixed in with military targets, because again, terror is a part and parcel way that the Russian army waged war. It's what they did when they backed Syria by putting chemical weapons into places like Duma, into civilian areas, to try and get the rebels to give up and not fight anymore and just go along with the Assad regime. And that's what Russia does when it wages war. It tries to terrorize the population so they no longer want to continue fighting. But it doesn't work in a democracy. Hamish Gordon talks about this quite a lot as well. He says, when you try and terrorize people in a place like Russia, it's a mafia state and fear works. When you do it in a place like this, where people love democracy and they love freedom and they love their country, it has the opposite effect. It makes people more resilient. But it's intentional. Of course it's intentional.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Blitz. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's broadly what I believe. So I'm glad that I'm aligned with reality somewhat. Talking about Odessa, and you just mentioned you've been out on, I presume, a patrol boat or similar. The Ukrainians have received a bunch of boats from Sweden and or Norway, the CB90s, that are these combat patrol vessels. Are those a sort of, and then they also are able to use these and unmanned sea vehicles with, I presume, air defense on board, but maybe not them, but actual boats. I know there's all sorts of different capabilities, but Odessa, I presume, because the Black Sea is the pathway for all of these drones, that's where a lot of the air defense is taking place. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's very restricted on how much I can talk about it, because it's very, sensitive, which is why it took me a while to establish relationships. But, these drones fly in right over the sea. You can see them coming because the air alert goes off about 15 minutes before a drone arrives, or 3 minutes before a ballistic missile. You can physically see it arriving over the ocean. And attack, they need to shoot that down before it comes over the mainland. Otherwise, you're going to be firing tracers into apartment buildings accidentally, right? So they don't,
right.
I won't discuss more than that, but it's helpful to shoot them down while they're over the water.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and not least because what goes up must come down. I talk about this an awful lot. So a lot of the damage that gets done to places like Kyiv gets done because you've successfully taken out a drone, but the drone is an aerial entity with an massive explosive on board, right? So if you shoot the wing of that down, shoot the wing of that thing off, then it's going to fall down and explode, or it's going to explode up there, and then fiery bits of stuff is going to fall. And like you said, thermite and shrapnel and all sorts of these things then cause problems on the ground, even if you are successful. So 500 drones being sent. And if you are 100% successful in shooting all those down or taking them out with electronic warfare, those are still 500 bits of explosives that are going to fall on the ground. So I guess you've seen the effect of these things falling and causing damage.
Yeah, I mean, again, in Odessa, the ones that are shot down are usually shot down before they get to the city. That's where all the air defense is concentrated. And it's the same in Kyiv as well. I mean, the air defense systems work to try and get these things out of the sky before they enter any built-up urban areas of the city. And the ones that get through are usually the new types of drones. And we see videos of them. Most of the attacks that we see happen in Kyiv that come out on Telegram or on Twitter, you can see the drone intact crashing into buildings. You can hear the buzz before it crashes. So those are the ones that get through. But Ukrainians obviously try and deal with this before it gets to a civilian population. But they're harder to shoot down. Again, the jet-powered ones, the ones with cameras, it's a cat and mouse game right now with these systems. And again, it's really hard to talk about. I've seen systems that are not available to show. They're very, very, very good, and they work extremely well, AI anti-drone systems, but they cost a lot of money, and Ukraine are basically funding this innovation and doing this in-house. They just need the cash. That's the most important thing. But the innovations at breakneck speed. The innovation in Russia shouldn't be underestimated. They're still a serious army, but on that side of things, the tech is not, I don't think, as fast as it's growing here. It's like breakneck speed here. It's pretty. When this war is over, I think people are gonna. All of this will be revealed. The speed of everything, the way that everything was done, all the AI systems. It's like when the space race happened, the Soviet space race. That's when optic technology advanced the fastest, because it was a race with two militaries to develop the better cameras to be able to go into space. We're seeing the same thing happening now. That kind of breakneck speed of development, but with AI and drone technology. Only comparable to that period. It's amazing.
This is why you want to be helping Ukraine. I mean, that's a frustration with the US, like taking a back seat, is that actually you get a lot of benefit from helping Ukraine. It's not aid to Ukraine, I've said this for years, is not a free lunch, right? You help Ukraine because it's geopolitically, strategically in your best interests, but actually there's a feedback loop and you're getting an awful lot of data and information, and you are able to make your own armed forces operate at a much better, more innovative level. And it's just bizarre that you would kind of walk away from that. But there you go. Yeah. You touched on something earlier, which is the identity of Ukraine. I remember writing an article just after the beginning of the war, when you start seeing the Ukrainian flag projected on, say, the Eiffel Tower and, you know, Houses of Parliament and whatever. And you're like, oh, goodness, Russia has actually achieved the exact opposite of what it wanted to do. It wanted to eliminate the identity of Ukraine, and what it did is it thrust Ukraine into the world to the point where we all know way more about Ukraine, and we appreciate Ukraine much more than we ever would have done previously. Did the Ukrainians have a sense of how much they've been thrust into the world?
I think Ukrainians are still overwhelmed by the global reaction to help this country, not just from governments, but from everyday people, from the volunteers that poured across the border to help, to the Ukrainian refugees. I remember when I was on the 27th of February 2022, I was on the border here in Medica, and watching, you know, Europeans from every single city hold up signs. Some said Berlin, some said Frankfurt, some said London, and they just driven there in their pedestrian, civilian cars, and just said, all of these millions of refugees on foot, jump in the car and we've got a spare room in this city, and then just driving people to safety. And I think Ukrainians will never forget that. And this country has been oppressed and colonized by the Soviets for so long. It was about crushing Ukrainian culture, art, music, language, recipes, everything. And there was a insecurity, there was a lack of confidence that Ukrainians really had. And they talked to me about this all the time before 2022. They didn't feel like they belonged on the world stage, like they had a place in this world. Like they kind of, Russia made Ukrainians feel like second-class citizens for generations. And now, for the first time, they've seen their flags flown across the entire world. For years, they've seen their own soldiers hold off one of the world's most feared armies. And there's a new confidence that they deserve a place in the world stage. And it's amazing to see. It's like a rebirth of culture and people. There's so many Ukrainians I know as well who didn't speak Ukrainian before 2022, but watched the world fall in love with this country, and people like you and journalists and just people from everywhere. And they've become even more fascinated and interested in their own history that Russia tried to erase. So that's a beautiful moment from all of this. And if Ukraine can survive it, then it'll be incredible. It'll never be forgotten. And it's always so nice to see. But it's also why it's really important to always show as much support vocally as possible and around the world, because it just means so much to people here. It means so much. Whenever I show my friends here videos of rallies in DC or New York or a Ukrainian flag held in London, they still can't believe it. Like, that's our flag, that's our thing, that's us, but why do they care about us so much? It's this beautiful thing, and gratitude from good people. It's so nice.
Yeah, I watched a video the other day that I advise everyone go and watch. It's by a YouTuber called Jimmy the Giant.
Oh, I know it.
The video is How Ukraine Changed My Life. And it turns out that he met a Ukrainian when he was on holiday, ended up getting married to her, and then visiting Ukraine. And in visiting Ukraine into quite a rural area where there was a real sense of community, a real sense of well, all sorts. That video is an absolutely fascinating video where he says, he really talks about the difference between nationalism, as in patriotism, as in a really positive sense of national identity, and the nationalism you get, say, back in the UK, where there's often that's tainted with a lot of history of maybe anti-immigration, and the Union flag in the UK going through a bad stage of being associated with a negative form of nationalism. And that's not the same kind of nationalism you get in Ukraine. It's absolutely fascinating video talking about how they're at a different stage of capitalism, like a young capitalism, which is not like Generica, where you go and UK, it's all about McDonald's, and we've imported an awful lot of Generica from the US, etc., etc. Is that your sense of Ukraine as well? What are your ideas on the national identity of Ukraine and the culture and how they do business?
It's a different thing. I think nationalism is a word that people are worried about in the UK, because England, I guess, Britain was a colonial empire, a bit like what Russia's doing. And if nationalism is taken too far, or I think people see it different to be a country that was colonized and a country that was a colonizer. And I think that's probably what he was getting at. I still need to watch that video. I was actually talking to him a couple of days ago, because they were in a cafe here last week, and I should have met them, but we just missed each other. But patriotism as well, and nationalism to an extent, it's about what you're celebrating. If you're celebrating your culture, your food, your recipes, your language, your history, like here, this is what makes a nation strong, and every country in the world should celebrate that. But if you're a nationalist in a country like Russia that's actively brutalizing its neighbors, it's a whole different thing. It just depends on what you're celebrating, I guess.
That's really interesting. So there's a colonial nature, like Britain being an ex-empire, a former imperialist nation. Then obviously there are other connotations, whereas Ukraine's never been that. So it's all about being oppressed and then standing up for something that's far more positive and freedom and ideals.
Yeah, it's like how Ireland has one of the strongest cultures. There is Irish pubs exist in every single country in the world, and no other country has a pub or a cultural export like the Irish pubs do. And that's because the culture in Ireland is so intense and so nurtured, because they were colonized by the British for so long that the only thing they had was their language, their humor, their history, their dress, and this is why they became an amazing cultural export in a lot of ways. And that's why I think nationalism and patriotism is different if you celebrate it in Ireland and if you celebrate it in England. So I kind of understand that, but it's an interesting conversation. But yeah.
If you ever speak to Jimmy the Giant soon again, just say, look, JP from ATP Geopolitics would love to interview you. I shot him a message on Twitter, like just a Twitter post. He's never going to read that. I'm interested in you as well, Caolan, by point of fact that earlier on I was listening to you say something about, I might go to, I don't really want to go to Hungary. It could be a little bit dangerous, and haven't gone to Syria. But I'm thinking, do you ever look back at your life and think, 10 years ago, would I have ever imagined that this is what my life would be? This is what I'd be doing. Like, did you have these moments of self-reflection?
Not really, because I feel like everything I've been doing just feels like natural. It feels like the right path. Going to Syria isn't really something I second guessed. I was just like, well, Assad's gone. Oh, shit. Sorry. They just hit the drone. They got the drone. It's good. Don't know if you heard that.
No, we couldn't actually. I couldn't hear that, but that's interesting, right?
They got it. So I always jump very slightly because it's like a pressure wave. But that was the sound of a drone exploding in the sky. So that's the threat removed. So it just feels like a natural thing, I guess. I mean, I've always, even when I was with Byline and I was traveling the UK making these films about Brexit, making these films about in Italy with John Sweeney in 2021. We went to the Palazzo Terranova, which is where the Lebedevs were getting compromat on politicians, and we were, doorstepping them and knocking them. I always just felt like I wanted to do something in truth-telling or journalism, especially after I was involved in the right-wing stuff. I wanted to do the opposite and actually tell the truth instead of, disinformation, this kind of rubbish. But I remember watching movies about investigative journalism with things like A Private War, and realizing what it takes to do that and what that journey would look like. And when I decided to come here, I kind of knew what it would look like and what it would involve. But it's weird. I don't know. I don't reflect that much. I think because here time stands still. It's very strange in Ukraine. There's obviously no airplanes flying. Time moves in a very, very strange way, and it feels disconnected from the rest of the world in a lot of ways. So it's probably only when I leave that I would really think about this, which hasn't happened really since Syria. So I don't know. Maybe
you
I'll
have
leave and I'll just be like, oh my God, what was going on?
well, do you have a close family? I mean, are you in contact with your family consistently and friends?
Sometimes, no, not friends really anymore. I mean, when I moved here, it was pretty much 100 miles an hour, just everything. Now all my friends are Ukrainian. They're all here.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've just got engaged here. To,
Congratulations.
to somebody. This is kind of nice, but I mean, I speak to my mom who lives in Ireland, but I'm pretty much just like the life that I had before. I made a channel trailer the other day, and it was looking back at me at Byline doing investigative journalism, and then coming here, and it looked like I was watching footage from a different person's life. It was very
Yeah.
strange. I always don't remember much before coming here, and I also remember like my life changing in 2022 when I first came to the border here and started coming to Ukraine and started doing this and coming back to London and going to dinner parties or having the same conversations about gossip in Chelsea with my friends. And all I could think about was like seeing white phosphorus in the Donbass or being shelled in Kherson. And like my whole, like everything changed from those moments and my notion of what was normal and not normal anymore and priorities. And I know that the life that I had before I came to Ukraine died the second I arrived here, and there was no going back. And I tried to go back. I tried to go back to London and live there for 6 months and go back to Byline and live a normal life. And it was impossible, not just because the work felt so meaningful here, but I'd been through so much insane stuff that I was like, I just need to go back. I can't really feel normal in a normal city anymore. Just going back to talking about the price of potatoes because of Brexit. So
I don't know if I asked this to you last time. I asked something similar because we had a touch on something similar to this. Do you get a sense of excitement from what you're doing? And I don't mean that in a like not downplaying that or trying to say that that's irresponsible, but literally like there's the idea that it matters, right? What you do really matters because of the importance of it all. But going back to London, did you suffer from not having literally the excitement of doing what you do and living where you do?
no, because I don't enjoy the feeling of it. Like that drone
Right.
exploding then.
Yeah.
East, a lot of people do come to these places and they do it to thrill seek and they do it because they want an adventure. I don't like that kind of adventure. I don't like being somewhere that's dangerous. And when you go closer to the front or in a place like Kherson, there's a pit at the bottom of my stomach. It's like a dark,
Yeah, I remember you saying that,
horrible
yeah.
feeling of dread. And I don't like it at all. But the feeling that I went to those places and told stories where a lot of people wouldn't, because there's just no war corresponding in a lot of these places anymore, and bringing stories that people desperately want the world to know, that the world should know, that Russia's trying to hide, to film festivals and to the world stage is so rewarding that nothing else can match it. No other type of reporting I could do in the UK could match the feeling of like gratitude to even to be able to tell these stories. It feels deeply meaningful. But no, I don't like being in these places, and I try to live as much as the normal life here as possible in Kyiv. You know, going to a nice gym every day, going to a normal restaurant, having a partner. You know, just living in a nice, normal way to try and stay sane. But it's just to tell these stories because so many people don't know. When I first published so much stuff from Ukraine, my friends back home, even some of them who worked in media, were like, holy smokes, I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know they were targeting civilians. And I'd be like, how do people not know that they're targeting civilians? How do people not know that that when Russians take a neighborhood or take a city, they wipe it out like they did with portable incinerators in Mariupol? And that was just like, okay, there's a massive void of information. If I'm good at storytelling, I'm going to do it here.
So that's a really important point, Caolan, because I get frustrated that Fox News, like the viewers of Fox News, are not shown horrific things from Ukraine. I think when Ukraine suffers a horrific loss, such as, you know, a strike on a hospital and what happened just recently with some of the missile and drone strikes over the last couple of weeks, some of the worst incidences, you know, when that building was struck in Kyiv as well, and other like horrific incidences, they need to be thrown onto billboards almost. Like Fox News viewers need to see that, to understand that civilians are freaking dying, that Russia is sending stuff at civilians to terrorize them, so that, you know, and Trump needs to see that. The people that need to see this are the freaking decision makers and the electors.
Yeah, and information spreads. It's even the videos that I make now, you know, they get a lot of views. and they're worth doing. You know, the video I put up 2 days ago talking about Russia's economy has hit 2 million on YouTube.
Bloody 2 million, yeah, well done.
Yeah, and this is good. And the people who are watching these videos are people in the United States, and a lot of people have voted for Trump. And people vote based on what they know, and where they get their information from is how they're informed. And if you can even add to 1% that pool of information of truth, then it's worth it. It's meaningful. So that's why I talk every day about these things. That's why I go to these places and film it physically, because it's indisputable. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, just before we do a couple of comments from the viewers, I guess one of the last things to say before that would be, like, I feel really positive about Ukraine after the end of the war, because what we were talking about earlier, like, is now it's in the international arena, Ukraine, in a way that it never was before, and it's been thrust into the limelight. And it's a beautiful country with a rich history, with a very welcoming people who have a lot to offer. Like what Jimmy the Giant was saying about, you go to a cafe in Ukraine and the food is amazing, it's clean, you go into the toilets, they're just pristine, and it's just what you do the same in the UK, and it's just a bit of a shithole generally. You know, it's just comparing the pride the Ukrainians have, because it's this young marketplace where they're all competing with each other, and it's got that vibrancy. And I just think that Ukraine has a really good future after this war of tourism, of attracting business, of being a welcoming place. Is that a fair representation of where Ukraine can be?
Ukraine will be a powerhouse if it wins this, a powerhouse of innovation, of culture. This country has been probably the most talked about country on earth for the last 3 years in our news feeds. So everyone in the world knows what Ukraine is. And as soon as the airports reopen over this country, they're going to be inundated with people visiting what Ukraine is. And it's going to be incredible, not just for tech, not just for the innovation of what they created, but there is a cultural identity here that's significant and beautiful. And again, it's pride. It's a country that's proud of itself and knows what it stands for. If you go on a train here in Ukraine, every carriage has its own conductor that lives in each carriage, that makes the beds and knocks on the door and tells you what stop you're going to get off at. And they take immense pride in that carriage, 72A, carriage 72B. And you see that everywhere. That's why this is the cleanest. It's the cleanest country I've ever seen as well. The streets are spotless. The idea that you would litter would be ludicrous. People would be shocked, because there's an immense pride. And it will be beautiful when the skies of this country are filled with civilian airliners again, and people can come here.
That frustrates me a lot, because I've got multiple sclerosis, and getting around is difficult for me. Like, physically moving and walking ain't easy. And I know that I'd be in Ukraine way more often if they had flights to Lviv, rather than having to do the whole, fly, train, this, that, and the other. It just makes it difficult. So it will make such a difference. I mean, the importance of air travel is crucial to a country like Ukraine. So it's suffering, from that. Richard Bennett, thank you very much for the memberships, matey. Really appreciate that. Goose Springsteen says, recently Stephen Kotkin said, based on mobile data, there's approximately 25 million people living in unoccupied Ukraine today, down from 40 million in February 2022. Does that sound a plausible population estimate? I heard about a year ago 28 million. So that sounds plausible to me, and it's much worse than people think. Is that what you would... Do you think there are far fewer people in Ukraine than they're letting on?
I have no idea. This is not something that because I only talk about stuff that I can definitely know about. I don't know anything about that. I know that Kyiv is busier now than it was before the invasion, but that's also because of refugees from the east and the south moving here.
Yeah, of course.
I genuinely don't know about population.
Yeah. So Stephen, thank you. Stephen Bendel from Norway. We can stop the Russian terror by crashing the Russian economy. No money, no bang. Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. That should be what the international community is absolutely focusing on. Finnish guy, thank you. Russia delenda est. Yeah, Russia must be destroyed. I agree, certainly politically. Thank you to Kevin. Thank you to Finnish guy, really generous. Sorry, just doing my thanks here. Michael Vuchar, to your guest, thank you for confronting Silias the Cypriots. Oh, I want to speak to you about this. Thank you, Michael Vuchar here. So Cyprus equals golden visa equals Beijing and the Kaliningrad of the Mediterranean. Right. This is right. Okay, so you had a run-in with Phidias Explain your Cypriot MEP or politician blokey that you had a run-in with. How's that going? Are you continuing to have your contretemps with him?
So this is a guy who was put into his position as a Cyprus MEP by Elon Musk, who was amplifying him endlessly. He met Elon Musk. 3 months later, he got elected. Elon shared every single one of his messages. Elon put him in that position because he undermines the EU. Yep. Elon doesn't like the EU because they're sensible and is about stupid tech. But what he started to do was, his name is Phidias, put out endless anti-Ukraine propaganda, repeating constant Kremlin press releases. And I've been watching him for a while thinking this is really, really dangerous. The stuff he was saying was appalling. He voted against condemning the abduction of Ukrainian children into Russia. And there were 512 votes and only 3 people abstained, and he voted against, right? He voted for. And this was absolutely insane. There was backlash. And then 2 days later, he shows up in Moscow for Victory Day parade, paid for by, I guess, the Moscow. So I was like, right, I'm going to do an investigation into this person. It's absolutely unhinged. I made a documentary about him by interviewing his old colleagues, his friends, people that used to work with him, who said that he doesn't actually have any moral beliefs. He's now putting out Russian propaganda. We regret meeting him. And then one of his friends said, you're not going to get an interview with him. He does not speak to journalists. He never gets confronted. But if you want to do it, then you need to get views, because all he cares about is views and attention and money. So I was like, okay. So I made a video saying, I'm investigating Phidias. I believe he's a Russian asset. And I think he is taking Kremlin money. That gets 2 million views on TikTok. So he responds, unblocks me, and he's like, fine, we'll do a debate. We'll do it in Parliament. You can speak to me and we'll do it on my terms and my camera crew and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, this is amazing. This is the first opportunity I can have to actually confront him. He seemed to think that I was just some like young TikToker, vlogger, right? He has no idea that I'm a journalist that actually knows how to do this. So
love it.
He was quite shocked. So I get to the Parliament 2 days before and I start speaking to other MEPs that are disgruntled with him. And I said, look, this guy is trying to set me up on his terms. I know what he's going to try and do. He wants to put me in a private room in the Parliament and he's going to ambush me. He's going to get a film crew. He's going to selectively edit it. So I need to get into that Parliament before, and I need to set up with a film crew. I need access in there. I'm going to do it right in the middle. So he can't get away, right in the center of the Parliament. And I'm going to confront him about this. So 15 minutes before his handlers are supposed to pick me up outside, I get to Brussels. I call him and I say, oh, by the way, I'm already in. Like, I thought I'd just come in and have a look around. Do you want to meet? And we could do this interview. And he was like, oh, okay, where are you? And I sent him a pin. So he walks straight into the middle of like the atrium, right? This is where all the politicians are. This is where all the media are. You can't get away. I say, take a seat. It's like Chris Hansen. Take a seat. So he sits down and I just say, right, how much is Russia giving you and what do they buy? How much money is the Kremlin giving you and what are they buying? And he had tried a few lines to ambush me, but he didn't have anything beyond that. And he didn't realize that I had a crew there, right? I'm filming from three different angles. Here are the stools. And then everything starts falling apart. And I have a list of questions here. He starts being quite competitive. He starts being quite aggressive. And as soon as he realizes he no longer has control of this interview and he starts grabbing me and trying to take control, then he reveals himself. And he said, well, what if some of the abducted Ukrainian children want to be kidnapped, right? This is what this person thinks. And it was like a mask off moment. And I said, this is despicable. This is one of the worst things I've ever heard. Because you hear they're still shooting drones. I thought they shot the last one down. And so I was like, this is it. And I put my notepad down as soon as he said that. And I said, this is finished. This interview's done. He's exposed himself. That video got millions of views across social media, across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And Parliament, people in Parliament opened an investigation. MEPs were talking about him. It was all over Cyprus television. It was all over Polish television.
Was it really?
All over.
Wow.
People were sending videos to me.
Dude, I just want to high five you.
Yeah. And I was like, this is good because people that voted for this person can see what he actually stands for. And so it had an impact. And it was so dangerous. And actually one of the local TV stations in Cyprus, and I have the clip on my Twitter, it said that Phidias has embarrassed the nation of Cyprus on the world stage. And I was like, oh God. So Brilliant. It was good. I'm glad that I did it. It had the effect. The effect was sunlight's the best disinfectant. This is who this person is, and he did not see it coming. It was pretty. I'm pretty proud of it actually. But there's plenty more people like him, so I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, that's absolutely fabulous, and that's a real mattering sort of thing, you know, putting the truth out there about horrible people like him who are, you know, representative of the nefarious influence of the Russians in this case in European politics. And that connection with Elon Musk as well is really important too, because Elon Musk, you know, doesn't want to be regulated, doesn't want his tech to be curtailed, doesn't want his power to be curtailed by the EU. And the EU is at the moment the only entity that's willing to stand up. The tech tax has been taken away from the Canadian and American trade deal negotiations at the moment. So there's no one going to hold tech to account in Canada. Are we going to hold tech to account in Europe? It's up to the EU to lead the way there. And so, you know, you can see what Elon Musk and others do in trying to undermine European unity there. So I think that's really important. Thank you so much, Bombsheller there. Thank you to Paul Gilbert. Thanks, Caolan and JP, for being such great ambassadors to Ukraine, for Ukraine. So good to have such an insightful analysis, Slava Ukraini. Thank you very much. And just people wishing you wonderful news, Caolan, on your engagement, wishing you both every happiness. And I agree with that. On nationalism, I think the main thing in Ukraine is Ukrainian nationalism is in opposition to Russian aggression and imperialism. It's important not to idealize, though, because there is a historical dark side to every nation's history. Like Volhynia, I mean, yeah, okay, that is true. There are issues with certain Ukrainian nationalism going back into the 1940s there with Poland, and that is something they are trying to work through. That's a valid corrective. Yeah. Just a couple more comments here. I think there's a danger of not supporting moderate nationalism in Western Europe. Why fight for a country that's terrible? We all need to be able to feel pride. Look at the way Britain abolished the slave trade globally, for example. Yeah, these are difficult conversations, and we're not going to sort them out in the last few minutes here. But yeah, certainly, you know, ideas of nationalism need to be thoroughly thought over. Thank you very much to Mal as well for supporting the channel, and Rami Stevens as well, who said, Rami Stevens earlier said, what am I doing? Listening to this. This is not how I should be spending a vacation time. Of course it is. You know, listen to Caolan at all times of the year. Oh goodness, I think is that the sound of
no, that's just a car.
Oh, that's a car. All right.
Yeah, it's all good. I think they were shooting something 5 minutes ago, but I think I don't know. They're just circling random drones today. I don't know what they're testing out the air defense. I don't know what's going on.
I heard earlier from Tim White that there was a reconnaissance drone over Kiev for an awful long time today, which is certainly a worry. But
that's probably what we heard go then, because there was quite a big bang, and they probably got it. So that's good.
Yeah. So okay. Well, look, Caolan, I absolutely love speaking to you. You are doing an incredible service for Ukraine and for, as you say, truth telling. It's such an important thing in
it's just fucking sports cars. It's annoying.
Oh, there's explosions and fire, and I'm like, I can't hear that. And then like,
I'm not used to telling the difference now. Before I would have been a bit nervous. Now I'm like, no, that's a car, that's a GE, that's a reconnaissance. Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, I was editing a video of my time today in Ukraine in February 2024, right? And it's when I was in Kherson. You can't go there now. I just wouldn't dream of going there. It'd just be too dangerous. But I was sitting outside with Pierre, a guy that does a lot of humanitarian work in Ukraine, and we were listening to the outgoing and incoming artillery at night. It's pitch black. And suddenly this and I shat myself, and it's like it was just the air conditioning kicking in. But I just like that just gives me a sense that I imagine being a soldier who has experienced the sound of FPV drones. Have you heard the sound of FPV drones yourself?
Of course, in Kherson there was one right above me about 6 months ago that was hovering. So. Yes, I know that sound. It's the worst sound. Very, very haunting. I was I was embedded with a drone unit in Kupiansk 2 months ago, and I stayed there for 2 nights, 3 kilometers from the Russians. Lots of FPVs there. Very haunting sound, almost like a Spitfire or something. It's kind of like the sound of war, right? Very, very unpleasant. I heard an FPV here a Mavic here in Kyiv the other day, because you can fly them if you get like approval just to do, drone shots, wedding shots.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, kind of really horrible flashback. So
there's going to be an awful lot of psychiatric needs for Ukrainians after the war is over. A lot of healing to be done, and there's going to be a lot of triggering of people with sounds. And goodness me, war is horrific, as I'm sure we all know. But we thankfully haven't all experienced. Just a few last minute thanks. Thanks, Goose, for all of your support. Stephen Bindal, Caolan, you are awesome. Please go and follow Caolan on all his socials. Goose, I don't have time to go through that one, but thank you very much. I will think about that in the meantime. Mitch Mazarol from Canada, thank you. We are support Ukraine. That's a good callback there. Amazing to see so many folks taking in the live stream. Yeah, thank you very much to all those people. Look, Caolan, any sort of last words? What are your hopes for the Ukrainians going forward? What are your hopes and concerns? Start with your concerns for Ukraine at the moment, then your hopes.
I think I basically covered so much. Let me just think. I mean, I think Ukraine have figured out what they need to do and how they're going to do it to fight back against Russia where it hurts. Russia's in a position right now with its economy that can genuinely lead to the end of this if they collapse financially and go into a recession, and the West can allow that to happen. And it probably feels like the most positive time I've ever spent in this country right now, this summer 2025. So, I mean, that's just the final thing. I think it's good.
Yeah. Well, let's finish on a positive then. So that's awesome. Well, look, Caolan, thank you so much, mate. I really appreciate you spending time with me. Let's do this again at some point in the near distant future.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. It was great.
Awesome. Okay, mate. Well, stay there for a second. Thank you very much to the team. Thank you so much for all the people who have been supporting the channel so much. Please continue to support Ukraine. We have just finished our campaign fundraiser for Car for Ukraine, and then we are starting one with Jiggers Poor, who are Lviv-based, awesome charity. So I'll keep you up to date with that. JR has been sorting that out on my behalf. And thank you to Caolan. Toodle pits, everybody.